When I walk into a courtroom, before the charges are read, before decisions are made, I intentionally pause. Not because the law requires it, but because people do. And in that pause, I'm reminded of something essential, that every person appearing before me is more than a file, more than a charge, more than a docket number. They're human. Standing on this stage actually feels familiar because the stage is asking of me the same thing the bench asks of me, to slow down long enough to truly see the people in the room. My name is Deirdre Moore. I'm a criminal court judge, a former litigator, a former businesswoman. I am a wife and a mother. But titles aren't why I'm standing here. I'm here because of something I've learned inside courtrooms and far beyond them. That every person appearing before me is more than a file, more than a charge, more than a docket number. I'm also standing here because of something I've learned inside courtrooms and far beyond them, and that is that when dignity disappears, a part of our shared humanity disappears with it. And what happens next often depends on one single choice: whether we choose to pause. You see, the problem is that we live in a world that moves fast, faster than any generation before us. Our systems, our institutions, they're designed to move people through quickly. Whether it's courts, whether it's hospitals, whether it's schools, they move very fast. And inside those systems, efficiency is praised and productivity is often rewarded. But humanity, or human beings, were never meant to be processed. And I see that most clearly when I work arraignments. Arraignments is that moment where a person is charged with a crime and they stand before the judge and they hear the formal charges and decisions are made really fast. In arraignments, the room moves fast. Lawyers speak, charges are read, decisions follow. And if I'm not intentional, something subtle and dangerous can happen. A person becomes a charge, a name becomes a number, a life becomes a date on a calendar. So I pause. Because in the space created by a pause, sometimes dignity is reinstated. Let me show you what I mean. I was working night court, and night court runs from 5 p.m. until 1 a.m. the next morning. So it was a little after 12:30 in the morning. I was working arraignments, and a courtroom at that hour feels like a hospital waiting room. No one wants to be there, and everyone is holding their breath. A 17-year-old appeared before me. Just 2 months earlier, he turned 17, and just 2 months earlier, he graduated high school. Okay? But now he's being arraigned on criminal possession of a weapon, gun charges. He wasn't loud, he wasn't defiant, but he looked stunned, as if life had been moving faster than his understanding. And in that moment, I believe it was. In the back of the courtroom sat his father, still in his work clothes, clearly having come straight from work to court. The lawyers spoke, the charges were read. I was required, to render a legal ruling. But before I did, I paused. And I directed the young man. I said, "Turn and face your father." The room went completely still. I said, "Before I decide anything, say something to the man that came here for you this evening." He tried to speak. Nothing came out. But then his voice broke. And through the tears streaming down his face, he managed to say, "I'm sorry, Dad." That's all he could say. And at that moment, his father began crying. And I don't mean a quiet cry or a polite cry, but the type of crying a man does when fear finally finds a door. And he said, "Son, I just want you to pick a college. I will continue working to take care of you, your brother, and your sisters. Just don't throw your life away. And at that moment, the courtroom gave way to something as old as time, a father and his child. The case still existed, the law still applied, but the room had changed. Because for the first time that evening, he was no longer a defendant, he was a son. I was still required to render a legal decision. Accountability remained, but something else entered the courtroom that evening, and it was dignity. And I learned something that evening. Punishment can change a behavior, but dignity can change a direction. And that's what the pause protects, dignity. Now that word dignity, it sounds simple, but history shows that it has never been guaranteed. There was a time in our country where the laws itself decided who counted as fully human. And even then, people protected their dignity. People like my ancestors, they protected their dignity. They taught one another to read when reading was forbidden. They found ways to share their stories while those very stories were being wiped away. They found ways to see each other when we were invisible to everyone else. This is why the pause matters. Now, the loss of dignity happens in big moments, like in history or inside fast-moving systems, as I've alluded to. But it can disappear just as easily in those small, ordinary moments of everyday life. Times when we decide who someone is before allowing them to ever tell us or show us. Times when we decide who's being difficult, who's being disrespectful. Times when we decide someone is no longer worth our patience. And during those times, we believe that we're reacting to a behavior, but often we're reacting to a moment and turning that moment into someone's identity. And we don't always realize we're doing this, but we're just moving too fast. Well, the pause interrupts that speed. A pause gives a child a chance to explain rather than be labeled. A pause gives a spouse a chance to be heard as opposed to being argued with. A pause allows a coworker to be understood instead of dismissed. A pause allows a stranger to matter instead of being overlooked. People aren't trying to be difficult. They're just trying to be seen. Because when people feel unseen, they react, they resist. But when people feel dignity, they're more likely to participate. They're more likely to listen. The pause does not remove responsibility. The pause allows responsibility to happen. In my courtroom, the pause lasts only seconds. But in those seconds, I'm reminded of something amazing. It's two things. One, people realize they are more than just a case. Two, I'm reminded that authority is not about the power to control people. It's about seeing them clearly enough to lead with both firmness and humanity. And the truth is, the pause affects me too. Because when I slow down long enough to truly see the person behind the charges, I don't make weaker decisions. I don't make softer decisions. I make wiser decisions. So here we are living in a world of instant reactions and immediate judgments. But humanity doesn't live at that speed. And so while we may not be able to slow everyone down, can't slow the world down, but we can choose to slow ourselves down. So the next time you feel yourself reacting quickly, what are we going to do? The next time we feel ready to decide who someone is, what are we going to do? The next time a single moment feels like it's turning into someone's identity, what are we going to do? Pause long enough to truly see the person. Pause long enough to remember that dignity, it doesn't just happen. We decide whether to give it. And you don't need a robe or a bench to do this. Every one of us have moments in our everyday lives where we decide who someone is. The question becomes simple. In those moments, will we pause? Because in the space of a pause, dignity has a chance to return. Thank you.